My parents' faces shifted, denial, calculation, then something hollow. Grandpa stood, chair scraping. Anything to say? Mom's voice cracked. We thought she didn't need it. She's always been independent. You told everyone she was irresponsible, Grandpa said. You let her go without medication. You let her work through pain while you upgraded your kitchen. Dad looked at me, fear mixed with shame. We were going to tell you eventually. After another 10 years? Grandpa asked. Silence answered. Stevens closed the folder. These accounts will be frozen pending investigation. Iris will be contacted regarding restitution. Mom inhaled sharply. Dad slumped. Grandpa turned to me. You don't owe them anything. I nodded. Not to him, to myself. I picked up my coat. No goodbye. Just my footsteps leaving the room. Grandpa drove me home in silence. When he parked in front of my building, he said, they won't touch another dollar. Not one. His voice wasn't angry. It was final. Inside my apartment, I set the folder on the counter. The papers fanned out slightly in the refrigerator's hum. I thought of the kitchen I grew up in, the gleaming appliances, the bright lights, the empty pill bottle hidden in my bag. Now, the silence felt different. Not something pressing down on me, something opening up. I finally had room to breathe. The folder stayed on my table all night, edges sharp in the morning light. It didn't ask me to forgive or forget. It only asked me to see. Boundaries aren't loud. They're the quiet places where you stop letting others write your story. If you've ever walked away from a version of yourself someone else created, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to choose the truth that belongs to you, and walk toward the life that finally fits. I opened a spreadsheet and started entering everything, dates, medical notes, costs, and added a column estimating what disability support should have been. When I calculated 10 years' worth, I felt nothing. Just truth settling into place. Near midnight, an email arrived. The benefits office had received my request. I whispered to the empty room, I won't fix what they broke. The next day, I returned to my parents' house. The driveway was full. Cars lined along the curb like someone was hosting a celebration, not preparing for a detonation. Inside, the dining room looked exactly the same. Same warm lights. Same arrangement. Same silence. Grandpa sat tall. Stephen stood behind him again, folder closed. No one greeted me. Grandpa spoke first. Let's get this done. Mom shifted. Dad, can we not do this right now? Iris is clearly. He raised his hand. She went silent. This isn't about Iris. It's about what was taken from her. Mark cleared his throat. We didn't take anything. There's been a misunderstanding. Stephen stepped forward and opened the folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper felt sharper than an accusation. He placed the first sheet on the table, monthly payments under my name, sent to my parents' address, signed by my mother. Then another sheet. Another year. Same pattern. These payments were intended to support Iris's medical condition, Stevens said. Every deposit was rerouted to this household, not to her. Color drained from Mom's face. Emma stopped scrolling. Dad muttered, we used that money for the family. For vacations? Stevens asked. For the remodel? For the SUV you bought 5 years ago? Mom blinked hard. We had expenses. And school wasn't cheap. The room tightened. I stayed silent. The numbers spoke louder than I ever had. Stevens placed the final sheet on the table, a 10-year summary totaling more than $280,000. Clinic fees. I'd spent nights calculating whether skipping a meal could stretch medication another week. I always told myself the math was temporary. I hadn't known my parents were doing their own math with money meant to keep me standing. I pulled out my phone. No texts. No missed calls. Nothing from my parents asking where I'd gone. Typical. I opened my banking app. My balance stared back, small and painfully honest. No unusual deposits. Certainly nothing like disability benefits. A cold clarity settled inside me. I typed an email to the benefits office. Hello, I'm requesting a full history of disability payments issued under my name. Please confirm all addresses on file. Thank you. When I returned to the dining room, I didn't sit down. I stood near the doorway, watching. Grandpa remained at his end of the table. The auditor, Stevens, as I'd learned, still stood behind him, folder closed. My parents pretended nothing was happening. Emma scrolled on her phone. I could have confronted them, asked why they took what wasn't theirs, why they let me struggle while they remodeled kitchens and funded Emma's trips. But confrontation was their language, not mine. Silence had always been my survival. Now it could be my control. I picked up my coat. Grandpa noticed. He didn't stop me. He didn't need to. Outside, the air was cold enough to scrape my throat. I walked to the end of the driveway, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Under a street lamp, I pulled out my stack of receipts, years of survival paid for by me alone. The wind lifted their corners. I held them tighter. Later, at my apartment in Seattle, the hallway light flickered like always. I didn't turn it off. I spread everything on the floor, receipts, bills, letters, my notebook, and began assembling, categorizing, cross-checking. I didn't need their reasons. I needed the facts. Facts didn't lie. Facts didn't choose favorites. Dinner continued with small talk, compliments about the food, Emma rambling about her next vacation, while my parents nodded like they curated her entire life. I kept my hands in my lap to steady them. Grandpa didn't touch his fork. Then he did it again. He repeated the same line he'd said minutes earlier, but calmer this time, letting each word land. You've been receiving disability payments for years. The table went silent again. A cousin glanced at me, confused. Emma looked annoyed, as if the interruption was inconvenient. I felt something sink, not fear, not anger, just a heavy realization that everyone knew something about my life except me. My throat tightened. What do you mean? I whispered. Mom froze. Dad stared down at his plate. No one answered. The man holding the folder stepped forward. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't a mistake. I excused myself. No one tried to stop me. That was the strangest part. A daughter walking away from a table full of family after being accused of receiving money she'd never seen should have caused at least one person to speak. But all I heard behind me was conversation restarting, people pretending a scene hadn't just happened. The hallway was dim. A framed photo of my parents and Emma hung under a warm lamp. I wasn't in the picture. I let the cool air settle over me and gripped the strap of my canvas bag, the one I used every day. Inside were receipts for co-pays, a prescription bottle with 2 pills left, and a small notebook where I tracked my medical expenses. I used to think that made me responsible. Now it felt like evidence. I slipped into the bathroom. The mirror reflected the soft, buzzing light. I pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of my nose. My reflection looked calm, too calm, like someone waiting for instructions. I sat on the closed toilet lid and opened my notebook. Every page was filled with dates, numbers, cheap ink bleeding into cheap paper. Rent. Medication. Groceries. Bus fare. I never knew when I'd have to stretch a bottle longer than I should. Once, I showed Mom a prescription, thinking she'd worry. She sighed. You need to be tougher, Iris. Don't depend on anyone. That became a rule stitched into everything I did. College made the divide worse. Emma went to a private university across town, Mom bragged for months. I went to community college and worked nights shelving boxes. When my textbooks were too expensive, I dropped a class. When Emma's elective didn't fit her schedule, they hired a counselor to arrange it. The memory that stayed with me happened in our kitchen. I'd just come home from work, my back aching so sharply it felt like a knife hidden under my ribs. I placed a crumpled prescription on the counter next to a bottle with only 2 pills left. Mom was seasoning chicken, back turned. Can you help me cover this? I asked. She didn't turn around. You're stronger than this, Iris. Don't be dramatic. The kitchen glowed with the brand new appliances they'd bought that spring, untouched by struggle. I stood there holding the empty bottle, and in that moment I understood, effort didn't matter. Pain didn't matter. Need didn't matter. Only hierarchy did. I didn't cry or argue. I just nodded and tucked the bottle back in my bag. That was the day I learned exactly where I fit in this family. Back at the dinner table, the room felt smaller than I remembered. The lights were warm, but nothing about the moment felt warm. My parents sat in the center where they always sat, angled toward the relatives they cared about most. Emma leaned toward Mom, whispering something that made them both smile. Comfortable. Untouched. Grandpa sat at the opposite end, jaw tight, eyes tracing my face like he was searching for confirmation of something he didn't want to believe. The man behind him, the one with the folder, wasn't family. His posture was too straight. Later, I learned he was an auditor Grandpa hired. The room went still before I even looked up. A chair scraped, a fork dropped, and then my grandfather's voice cut straight through the noise. You've been getting disability payments for years. Every face turned toward me. Heat climbed up my neck, the air tightened, and the silence felt like it wasn't waiting for an answer, just a reaction. I managed one breath before whispering, "What do you mean?" That's when I noticed the man standing behind him, holding a closed folder. My parents wouldn't meet my eyes, and before anyone said another word, he opened it. I grew up in a house where silence traveled faster than truth. My parents, Linda and Mark, liked things neat, predictable, controlled. I learned early that the easiest way to keep the peace was to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. My younger sister, Emma, never had to learn that. She was the sun in every room she entered. When she asked for something, it appeared. When she struggled, someone stepped in before she even felt the fall. Dad used to say, "She just needs a little more support." Support was the one thing I never qualified for. I remember the first time I felt the imbalance in my bones. I was 12, standing in the kitchen with a field trip form in my hand. The fee was $35. Mom barely looked up from the bills. "We can't do extras this month," she said. Minutes later, Emma burst in waving a flyer for dance lessons. Mom smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. Same week, same bills, different rules." By high school, the pattern didn't just continue, it deepened. When Emma's laptop cracked, Dad ordered her a new one that same day. When mine stopped working, he told me to use the library. Emma got private tutors. I got reminders to work harder. 2 kids. 2 realities. One truth nobody said out loud. Then came the injury, a slip on wet tile during my part-time shift. My back never fully recovered. I moved slower, lifted carefully, saved every receipt for medication because